disproportionate impacts on marginalized and precarious members of our society, and with that, global calls to end systemic racism, white supremacy, and to question our institutions in terms of how knowledge on development is created and by whom. And so the university at this in this degree is no exception. There's been a rallying call around this for some time now, but it's gaining renewed spirit for decolonizing the university. And so it's important to note that decolonization cannot be a metaphor for what for everything that we want to improve about the university at the level of you know, these kinds of injustices. It takes really kind of reshaping the way knowledge production is taking place from its core. And so and this is something that certain indigenous scholars have been saying for quite some time. It's important to note that decolonization is a trigger word. I mean, the word decolonization refers to the fact that it's meant to disturb, it's meant to upset the status quo. It cannot be something to add to the status quo. And so it means disrupting the sort of respectability norms and professionalization that tends to happen in Northern institutions, where debates are encouraged or are prescribed in very, very specific framings in which you have two sides of the same coin, you know, a pro and a con position over a particular issue. But this actually erases these forms of conversations, in a way, erase the dominant and hegemonic and historically asymmetrical in terms of power relations, positions that particular discourses have. And so decolonization would seek to rupture that form of status quo. It's really about a reflection on the kind of knowledge that is being generated and how it is being taught that is needed. And so some may argue that to decolonize the curriculum risks sort of disrupting the canons of intellectual history that has come from Europe, and that even if that history has tended to be viewed from a particular, very specifically narrow lens. And so this is exactly where North-South partnerships actually come into play. So going beyond the instrumentalization, and also not so that Southern scholars can do the work that Northern scholars need to do, but more fundamentally to stimulate the needed self-reflection on positionality and relationality in teaching, and also in the way knowledge gets co-generated in practice. And at the same time, what's happening is that Southern scholars who come to Northern institutes, they learn, they get trained in sort of European social thought and that European intellectual history and philosophy, and in doing so, they sort of inadvertently absorb that and then bring that back to their understanding of particular grounded struggles and those same terrains of inquiry back home. They've sort of framed this as intellectual imperialism. That there are key ways in which the global South has become sort of dependent on the North, and this happens through dependence on ideas, in some cases reinforcing the domination of already existing sort of Eurocentric ideas and knowledge production practices, dependence on the technology of education, on aid for resources, and as well as for teaching and financing studies, and also in the way that writing takes place, sort of the language style that gets shaped by academic publishing houses, journals, and the universities themselves. Principle among some of these is really to encourage dialogue with others in the same situation, so that we can provide resources, mutual support for each other, experiment in relation to the implementation of novel ideas that do not, that scratch beyond the surface of some of these injustices, and I guess, in a way, seeking intellectual exchange partners so that we can understand how we can intervene within teaching and field work, and in the co-generation of knowledge in the field. In revaluing North-South global partnerships is to question the existing hierarchy of knowledge and practice. How can we go beyond unidirectional teaching practices? So who is leading the process of knowledge generation and in defining the criteria around knowledge production? Knowing that it's the process and not just the end objectives. You know, we're not just trying to expand the amount of PhD we have, the number of grants that can be obtained within the partnership, things like that. We're actually looking at the process here. So finally, just to say that we want to go beyond settler guilt, or the colonial guilt of the past. We want to take actionable measures that go beyond symbolic, sort of symbolic measurements or symbolic acts, and think clearly about how our actions are truly building those meaningful collaborations in the spirit of decolonization.